Hey guys, welcome to We All Got Problems. This episode, we're going to be talking about journal writing and how it's magically therapeutic. We also have the extreme delight of getting to hang out with Andrea Feltrin, who is a Vancouver, BC screenwriter, filmmaker, comedian, international superstar, profesh, creative person storyteller. Andrea will be sharing with us not only about her journey into becoming a writer, but also how she uses it to process the challenging things in life. Andrea has been in the professional stand-up comedy scene for 6 years, and she has also been part of many important filmmaking incubators, including the Whistler Film Festival. So anyway, without further ado, let's jump right in.
Our next comedian coming to the stage has high energy but a bad credit score. Give it up for Andrea Feltrin.
I mean, are we all being bombarded with ads for affordable therapy? Yeah. I've been getting some really personal, targeted content lately, which always makes me question, what sort of person the algorithm thinks I am, which is never good for my self-esteem. I was on YouTube recently, and there were two of the top suggested videos for me. The first one was titled, How to Be a More Interesting Person. And the second one was, How to Not Look Frumpy and Older Than You Are. Dash, get out of that rut. Who says I'm in a rut? And also, am I being bullied by YouTube?
Could you introduce yourself to us and tell us what makes you super special and magic?
My gosh, absolutely. My name is Andrea Feltrin. I am a big international star writer, as you can tell. Yeah, I'm a filmmaker and comedian. I'm queer. I'm a settler. I'm an introvert. I'm a Scorpio. I'm a dog person. I'm an overthinker. Those are my flags, whether they're red or green. You can decide. What makes me special? I'll let you decide.
Why was that so passive?
Am I special even? Are we all special?
I mean, honestly though, you actually do this professionally. You're a writer, and you also write as a form of... No, I shouldn't have laughed when I said that.
You're a professional, LOL.
Okay, let me rewind. I loved your self-introduction, and of course, it's not, enough to contain everything and all that you are, because you're just mega special, and we're really lucky to have you, because not only are you a big international professional writer for film and TV, serious,
we can laugh because it's not true,
and you're a stand-up comedian as well. Yeah, so can you tell us a little bit about maybe, what spurred you on into diving this hard into writing as, part of your life?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like my earliest writing memories are me just really liking the idea of writing, and I would have my little notebook and with fuzz on the outside sit in a sunny window, just melodramatically looking out, and then write 2 sentences and be like, another tough day is
How old were you when you were sitting on the windowsill dramatically writing?
Gosh, probably like 7. Yeah.
Were you reading a lot back then? What kind of made you feel like writing is special?
That's a good question. I don't know where that illusion came from, because I definitely wasn't a reader. I could not read a book to save my life. I think probably a lot of it stems from just overthinking, because I think part of writing for me is getting my thoughts down. I would think a lot as a kid, sit there out the window, whether it be daydreaming or processing things that have happened at school. And so it was a way of putting those thoughts to paper.
That's amazing. And then you went from dreaming about it to actually doing it.
I still sit in the sun melodramatically writing in my journal.
Oh, that's actually quite beautiful. And what do you kind of get from these different kinds of writing? What is it like when you're writing professionally versus, when you're writing comedy or when you're writing kind of for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because for writing like comedy and I do like script writing and stuff, like that's all written with the intention of like an audience in mind, like you're like specifically visualizing how it's gonna like play out on screen and like how people are gonna react to it. I'm always definitely like the first audience member in mind. I want to like write stuff that like I want to watch or like I would find funny, but ultimately it is gonna be like other people seeing it as well. And depending on like the project too, some of them I'm writing it specifically to fit a certain mandate, whether it be like for a specific fund or because I know like, you know, people are selling Christmas movies or like something like that. But when I'm writing my journal, I mean, it's definitely like, it's mostly for me to just like process things. I think I still sort of write things in a way that like is with myself as like an audience member in mind. So sometimes I like will insert like jokes into it that like I'm gonna read and like laugh about later. So I'm like writing things for myself. But there's also a part of me that's like always very hyper aware that like if I were to die, when I die, if I were to die, when I die, like I'm sure people are gonna read it. And so I think that's both like terrifying but also really like reassuring that like I have something to like leave behind that I hope like people will be able to like read and either laugh at or like get, I don't know, hopefully something out of it. So I don't know. It's
It feels like
interesting.
it's both romantic and incredibly generous.
I mean, generous in the fact that maybe nobody wants.
But I feel like you were deliberately, there's an intention even of connecting after you're gone.
Yeah. Like, I think that's something that I've really like understood about myself too, is like writing as a way to feel like, yeah, like I have some sort of like significance or like legacy to leave behind. Like I'm not planning on having kids or anything. So it's like I there's like
So
something,
your journals are like your children.
like not, you could say journals are like my children.
I birthed this one in
I
2020.
birthed this one. It takes about 9 months for me to finish them. So yes, you can say my journals are like my children. I'm just like, well, there it is. People can read it, or maybe they'll just throw it straight.
And either way, are you kind of
Either
open
way,
to
I'm
whatever
gonna be
happens?
dead, so I have no say in what people do with it.
When we express ourselves and we're not exactly being perfect with our expressions, but that makes it a lot more interesting than, reading something that is already in print and it's all like edited and perfect. Well, actually, that makes me super curious. How about self-censorship?
Has anybody else had their heart broken by a federal arts organization? I have 27 times in the past year, which is a lot. I'm an independent filmmaker. I know, right? Cringe. Yeah, so I do a lot of grant writing, and I always feel like the process of applying for grants is a lot like asking a kid what they want to be when they grow up. And then once they kind of like struggle through the answer and tell you the secret to their hopes and dreams, you just slap them across the face. Like, not on my dime, you won't.
How does self-censorship play or not play? What is your kind of freedom of expression? How does that feel for you when it comes to writing?
Sometimes as I'm writing, I'm like, don't know how to spell this word, and I'm like, do I look it up like spell it correctly, or do I just keep going because like it doesn't really matter and I'm just like the thought is sort of like flowing. So I definitely try to have proper spelling and grammar, but that's definitely not always the case. And sometimes I'm like scribbling it out, be like, that isn't actually like what I meant, and I'll go and like rewrite it. So, I mean, I try not to do that as much, but there is the like copywriter perfectionist in me that does try to like make it as like perfectly worded as possible. But I think that also hinders the process when you're thinking about those things, because that's not the point, right?
Yeah,
So
because you're being both editor and grammar.
yeah, and it's
I
like you're
see, I
writing
see.
it by hand, like in a notebook. Like it's supposed to be rough and like in the moment
That's a good
and
point.
not perfect. So who
I love
cares,
that. Actually,
really?
I completely get it. Like when I'm writing in a notebook, I find that I tend to kind of feel like this handwriting is bizarre, or like who is writing this handwriting?
Yeah.
And
What does this say?
it's like, what does this writing say about my personality? And then already it's like totally distracting me from the actual purpose, which, like you said,
Yeah.
is a notebook.
Yeah.
How do you break it up and make yourself more loose then for writing? Like, have you ever had exercises that you do, or like, do you free associate, or what makes
I
you do it?
have, I mean, I guess like in a sense it's all kind of free writing, sometimes depending on like, yeah, like what it is. Like I have prompts, like I have like one journal that's just like a bunch of writing prompts. So if I'm feeling lazy and don't want to write like an actual journal
Mm-hmm.
entry, I'll
Do you
just be
actually
like,
use those prompts? Like, do you ignore them or you use them?
yeah, I have them. I think some of them are bad, to be honest, but I think that's
Mm.
also the point, is you're like, this is making me think of in a weird way. Like sometimes I just like argue with the
Mm.
prompts. I'm like, who would write this prompt? But it is
Mm.
helpful to have like something. I honestly don't feel like there's many times where I've like sat down to write and like not had something to say or like start with. Like I think if anything,
Mm.
I have trouble like curving it in sometimes. I think it's interesting because journaling, like a lot of people and like even myself, I kind of had to get over the mindset of like sitting down, at which a lot of my old 7-year-old journals are as well. It's like, I went to the beach today. We had a picnic. We did this. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, you don't have to just like recount your day. And you don't have
Mm.
to like have a like list of like everything you've done throughout the year. Like it's more also like you
Mm.
just have like a feeling about something or a thought or like I don't know, something like sparked an idea. Like you can write about just that and not feel like you have to be like, oh, and also I forgot to include that I moved 2 weeks ago and it's been really stressful for me. Like you can write
Right.
about whatever you want, really. You don't have to like
Yeah.
curate it in a specific way just because it's a journal and it has a date on it. You don't even have to put a date
Yeah.
on it, really.
That's true. That's
That would be wild.
revolutionary.
I couldn't do that.
I would find it hard as well, but I like that you say throw away the format though. I love that. I think that actually is quite liberating.
I had one journal that didn't have lines on it. It was just like a blank page. And I'm like, now this is living. This is like, it did look like in the book of like a psychopath, though, for sure. It was like all slanted. I don't think I would do that again.
The one
It
time,
was a one
that
time.
one time I lived.
Yeah, the one time.
Yes, yeah. Do you think doctor handwriting or shit handwriting is because, people who are neurodivergent, like people who are, really creative, I admit for myself that I have like pretend nice handwriting when I know the public's gonna see it.
Public
And
facing
then
writing. Yeah.
it's like, yeah, exactly. And then it's out of control. Like when I'm just writing for myself, I'm like, oh, this is so bad. I don't even want to see this writing, but I want to get these things down and, kind of that out of sync feeling. Do you get that?
The beginning of the journal entry, like I'm always trying to keep it like really neat handwriting, and then like by the end, especially if I've been writing for a while, it's like so sloppy and all over the place. So my biggest hindrance really is my hand. I'm a very like aggressive, like tight gripper, so
Mm-hmm.
my hand cramps up if I like write for too long, and sometimes I have to like take a break.
I totally, totally hear you. And I almost feel like whoever invented that writing can only be done with the hand. It's like, well, I have my other hand, I have my 2 feet.
Yeah.
Because sometimes when you're writing, you just want to keep writing. But the
Yeah.
truth is, maybe typing is a little easier, but somehow feels a lot less personal.
I can definitely type for longer. And sometimes like if I'm traveling or something and I don't want to like bring my actual journal, I'll do like written like typed journal entries, which I can go for longer. And then but that too, then I'm like, ooh, spell correct over here. Like, I'm gonna put a nice font, So it's
Right.
definitely different and feels more work like, I think.
Yeah, I hear you. So it kind of matters, what we use to write with, whether it's our hand or, whether it's a device or a
Yeah.
journal.
A quill.
And you're saying like getting out of your own way in terms of writing.
Yeah.
Okay, so Julia Cameron, she's a well-known filmmaker actually and scriptwriter
Embarrassing for me.
for her generation. Well, okay, so her thing is with the artist's way, her big magical component actually is called the morning pages. So the morning pages
Okay, I
basically,
have heard of morning pages.
see, it's famous. So supposedly, if you wake up and you write 3 pages a day on paper that, is like, you're not going to look at it, you just put it in an envelope. Yeah, and you don't judge yourself. And apparently, after, a period of time, your inner artist will be liberated.
Wow. Okay. I've been doing it wrong. I have no envelopes.
You're not doing the artist way.
I'm not an artist and I'm not liberated. That's for sure. That's what we've established here.
Biggest liberation is realizing none of us are liberated. I think a lot of people have had their own kind of like breakthroughs and stuff, but I think what I get from it is that having a routine or having a habit of writing, and even what I'm hearing from you as well is that, if you break through your own kind of judgments about it, if you break through, any of the blocks that you might put in your own way, and once you do it, then it becomes something that's repeatable or that you kind of make discoveries with.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, yeah, I think I definitely know people who do like either morning pages or something like consistently where like every morning they're, yeah, writing or like force themselves to sit down and write. I wouldn't say I'm like as consistent about where or when or like what I write, but I've also learned to just like, yeah, not judge myself about that, like I used to be like, oh, I have to write about all of these important things that have happened, or like, oh, I haven't written in like a month, and it's like that's okay. You don't have to like don't beat yourself up about it if you don't, like if you want to, that's great. If you have the energy, or like even just even 2 sentences when you're 7 years old, just write like a little something, but don't feel like, because then I think if it becomes a chore too, then that's also not going to make you want to write. It's one thing to like, yeah, have free writing or like a routine, but also like if you don't do it every day, that's okay. That's okay too. Do what works for you.
I love it. I think that actually feels like taking a big breath and right, like it's both for good, right? It's not that,
Yeah.
have this perfect habit, but it's also knowing that I don't have to be perfect.
Yeah. No one is perfect.
Newsflash again.
No one. No one.
Mm,
No one.
nobody
Yeah.
at all. We're sure of that.
We are absolutely sure of that. Not even you. Not even you listening at home.
Whoever you are. And now go journal about that.
Just bullying the listener.
Can you imagine?
You're not perfect.
Go write about how you're not perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, actually, I'm not perfect. My phone is on somehow. Okay.
I heard
I
that.
take that off. Yeah.
I heard that and I'm judging you for it. No, I'm kidding.
Well, I'm not perfect. I'm just going to demonstrate that I can fully embrace my imperfection.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't think so. I think, it's really hard for all of us. What I embrace is that it's really hard, for all of us to embrace that we're not this so-called perfect, right? Actually, I love something that we've talked about before is that there's this whole like let's celebrate the dorks, right? Like let's celebrate
Yeah.
the people who geek out on what they love. Because when you're growing up, there's like this whole established like heart line by I don't know who about what it is to be cool.
Yeah.
Right. And did that ever lead you into journaling?
Not being cool. Did that ever lead me into journaling? Just as far as like not living up to expectations? Is that kind of what you mean? Or wow, what a question. This is all to distract from the fact that let me mine my childhood trauma briefly for this question.
Yeah.
No, I'm just trying to think about it. I mean, I think there was definitely part of me, which it's interesting because, like, as a kid, like, I was such a liar. Like, I would lie all the time. But I think it was because I was trying to, let me just justify my lying. I think it was like, it was never in a like malicious way. This is something I'm like, either like imagining or I like want for myself or I'm trying to fit in a box. Like for reading, for instance, because I wasn't like a great reader and I didn't read a lot, I was very distracted. I would like pretend to read and like tell people that I read books. Like I fully lied to my parents and said that I read the whole Harry Potter series just because I wanted all of the books on my bookshelf because I thought that was cool, Like I was like, I'm gonna. So I would like lay them, like holding a book, fully daydreaming about something else not related, and like flip through pages. Like, well, finish the new Harry Potter book.
Don't know
put
who
it on
died
a
in this
shelf.
one.
It's like, why did I do that? Like, I did that
Wow.
because I wanted
Yeah.
first the books because I thought like a set of books. No, that's
Right.
writer. That's something a writer would have. Shelf is a full set of books. But yeah, I like lied a lot as a kid. I think to like create a life that I didn't have, or like something to like fit in. Like, oh, everyone else is reading Harry Potter, or like I wanted a dog really bad, so I would like tell people that we were getting a dog. But I usually like got caught in these lies, and I think that like yeah. But I think it was good. I think it was necessary because now I can't lie. Like I get so much anxiety because I got caught so many times that I'm like I don't, I'm very like honest now by default. So I think that was an essential part of growing up. But I think also lying in a way is like writing because you are like imagining situations that like happened, like, or things that are sort of like not within your life or like scope of what's real. So I think just like I was a very like imaginative kid and also didn't like grow up with like video games, or like we didn't watch a lot of like movies or TV. So I was always, and obviously I didn't read. So I think I was left to my own devices to like.
But you did a lot of acting.
I did a lot of acting and overthinking. So I was just
While
stuck in
holding
my
a
own
book.
head. Yeah, while holding a book to maintain the illusion. So yeah, I guess that would be an example of like trying to fit into a box or something that's like considered normal.
But I think actually even that narrative, that story is fascinating, right? Because you went from a place of fantasizing and trying to, in your very young self, kind of live this fantasy, whether or not you read this book, you knew that it fulfilled part of that whole, like, I'm a writer extraordinaire. I need the full set.
I need the full set.
And, hearing that you grew up without that kind of entertainment, right? Film and, and then you ended up working professionally as a filmmaker.
Yeah, the irony.
So I think, but that's so neat. Like, I think that narrative, there's something in there, right? There's something actually quite nuance and full circle.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of glad. Like, obviously, when I was little, I was pretty resentful that, like, all, people in my grade had, like, one of those little, like, Game Boys. And, like, yeah, like, there were so many things that, like, other kids were allowed to have that my mom just, like, limited us on. But now I'm very, like, grateful for it, because I think it was, like, part of early stage, like, forcing me to, like, create my own worlds, or like imagine things, and like be a bit more like creative by necessity. I don't know, like, if that still would have been the case if I had access to more of those things, but yeah, it is interesting.
Well, I mean, I'm wondering why your mom kind of decided to restrict those.
I love my dear mom. She like owned a health food store, so she was like, like sent me to like daycare with a pack of raisins, and like everyone else was eating gummy bears, and it was like, Andrea has to have the raisins. So like she was doing it for sure for her own benefit. And
Right.
yeah, she like really didn't like guns. So like we weren't allowed to have like water guns, or like play with toy guns, or any sort of like violence. We weren't allowed to, like watch The Simpsons. And like I had a younger sibling too, so like a lot of the like content that we did consume was like younger skewing. So even now there's like so many movies like TV shows that I just like have no pop culture references to, because I just like never saw and I've still not seen.
Wow.
But
And it's fascinating because, it sounds like your actual ability to be creative, like you said, your ability to imagine things into being and then to write them and then to have people make these, into sets, into characters and speak those lines. It seems to all come from this place of really leaning into creating your own world when it's not kind of spoon fed to you.
I definitely was doing my own thing.
Yeah, and I mean, it's serving you now.
I do identify as being financially insecure. I don't have a Costco membership, but my roommate does. So I like to tag along, and we buy a couple items in bulk for the house that we share. One of the things we buy is like a giant block of Parmesan cheese. But recently they told me they're not willing to split that with me anymore because I use way too much of it. And so I was like, okay, well, like, just like say when. And she was like, now, right now. And that's been grading on our relationship ever.
We met in stand-up comedy where you were already doing it. Yeah, and I was going to my first class ever. And when I told friends that I had signed up for this class, they were like, oh my God, like, you're so brave. How could you do that? And that was the first moment I felt a stab of fear.
Because they said you were brave. You're like, oh gosh. Am I?
I'm like, oh,
Do I have
does
to be?
this require courage? So that actually kind of scared me. But then as we did it, yes, I realized, whenever, Sasha, our teacher, was saying like, jump on stage now and do like a 1 minute on the spot. And then I would be like, wow, my heart's really going. And that's when I realized that it takes a lot to, stand up and be seen and be heard. So what kind of brought you from wherever you were with your life? What happened before stand up? What has been going
were
on
you
since?
doing
We're times desperate.
before stand up? We're
Yeah.
times desperate.
It just suddenly got curious, like, what pushed you over the edge to do
No,
this very scary thing?
I mean, we're desperate because I technically started doing improv. So I did improv in when I lived in Ontario for a couple years. I was in a troupe there. And then when I moved to Vancouver, I was like very determined to get into improv again. So I like went to a bunch of shows, and I would like go talk to people afterwards. And like where I was doing it before was like a very small sort of town, you could say. And so it's like, oh, there's one improv troupe, or there's like, so it was like, of course I was in it because they can't say no to people. So when I came out here, yeah, I was like trying to get into improv again. And it just seemed like everyone I talked to was like, who the fuck are you? And like, no, we have enough people.
Really?
Yeah, so it was just like very clicky. and I couldn't get into it. And so then, but I still wanted to do comedy. So I was like, okay, well, like, I guess I'll do stand up because I can at least do it by myself. Like, I don't need a group to do it. And also, going from improv to stand up for me was like, improv, you don't know what the heck you're going to say. You're just going up on stage anyway. The idea of being able to like write something and practice beforehand and like prepare before you go on stage, and also to like not be competing for stage time and like have a microphone. I was like, this seems a lot easier. I don't know why I wasn't doing this before. So yeah,
I love the way you kind of described it. It does suddenly sound so much easier.
Yeah, so it was kind of like bred out of desperation because I just couldn't get into improv. Which is also why I do so much writing, like since I've moved out here, because I didn't have access to like crew or like a community of film people. So I'm like, I guess I'll just write a bunch because that's something I can do on my own without needing other resources. And then I've just been doing that ever since. I haven't done improv since I moved out here, but I really like it.
Well, I agree with you. Like, I actually have the same feelings about improv versus stand-up. Like, I find that improv requires a level of saying yes and listening. And also sometimes people give you, you know, maybe just really bizarre things that you have to then act like you are game for when, you know, maybe it's something very sexist or something, you know, whatever it
Yeah,
is,
for
right?
sure.
Yeah. And then
Yeah,
it's
it can
like,
get weird.
I don't want to do that. And whereas with stand up, I found that this community, especially the one that, you know, we find ourselves in, are full of these brilliant queer activists, right? Many female presenting BIPOC as well. So, you know, I just think it's a super group of, you know, super amazing people.
Yeah.
You know, was stand up always like that for you? What was the community like? And is that important to you?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it really like opened me up to a good community of people. That was also part of the reason of me wanting to like take the classes, was to like meet other people to go to open mic nights with. But yeah, I feel like it really just like exceeded any expectations that I had. Like everyone is so great, and it's been such like a welcoming, supportive, amazing community that, you know, obviously we're still in contact and like I still see them all the time, and it's been so great. And I feel like I've been really like privileged in that sense, because that's sort of like the community that I like got started in. And even then, like a lot of the shows, like before I took the classes, like most of the shows I was doing was like queer femme, like BIPOC shows. So that to me automatically is like, it's funnier because it's more like relatable content, more interesting content. It's funnier, but also just like more welcoming and like a healthier environment. So I feel really privileged that like that's most of the shows that I started in and then kind of continue to do. And it wasn't until like, so this year and like last year, I've done a couple shows of like that weren't that space. But for me now to be in a space like that where people are maybe saying like homophobic jokes or kind of like sexist humor, it's like comes as a shock because I'm usually not in those shows and spaces. So it's very rare that I'm in those other experiences now, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, and those other experiences, you know, should be called out for what they are, and they're not comedy, really.
It's always interesting, yeah, because it's like how much do you like want to like comment on the other people's acts, and how much do you like, I only have 5 minutes, so I'm just gonna do my own thing and hope that like the audience finds it refreshing because there's one gay person in a midst of other cis hetero men.
Yes, I totally know what you're saying completely. Like, how many more, you know, jokes about their lower body parts do we need to do
there's also
in this
just
one
like
show?
an education aspect too, where I'm like, I feel like I got to talk to these guys afterwards and be like, you know, you
I
you
feel
can
called
do
to
this.
help you.
Yeah, I feel compelled to help you because you are losing out on pleasure. I will tell you that.
Some people are, when they're writers, they're like, I'm still looking for my voice. I
Yeah.
found my voice. Where are you at on that journey?
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting because like I don't think I've ever really like thought about that actively as I'm writing something. It's not like I'm
Mm-hmm.
like going through and being like, "Oh, I gotta put this in my voice." And I've also been told by people, they're like, "I really like your voice in your writing." I'm like, I don't know what it is. What can I say? I wouldn't say I'm like actively curating my voice or like trying to write in a voice that's not mine. Yeah, I think I guess part of it also comes back to like me being the first audience too, though, because like I'm writing stuff that I find funny. It's not something that I've ever felt like I've struggled with.
Yeah. And I think that's actually really powerful that you did away with, even being concerned about what the people
I'm not
might think.
concerned.
And, you just went for it. So, it's not like there was a time where you felt like your voice had to be repressed or you had to stay like, kind of quiet for any reason or minimize yourself in any way. It's more that this is like your passion, your pleasure.
I mean, sometimes I do wonder if it's like a professional context, like if I'm writing like in school or like cover letter or something where I'm like, sometimes I toy between like, should I put something funny and weird or should I keep it like professional? So I feel like that's a time when I do sort of like judge myself and I'm like, oh, are they gonna like think this is unprofessional if I put a joke in my cover letter? But then I've definitely kind of over the years more like leaned into that and I'm like, you know what, like that's you and it's better they know now than me try to like create an illusion of me being like super professional all the time and not cracking jokes because I will be. If you hire me, I will be cracking jokes. So
You
I
get that
I
for
might as well
free.
warn you now. Yeah.
And okay, so actually, you know what you just did? You gave me a moment of therapy just now.
I
You
did.
did. You did. You're also a therapist. So
Wow.
when you talked about the resume writing and, kind of like, should I be more serious? And then you were like, well, you kind of said, fuck it. You were like,
Yeah.
I embrace my authentic voice. And then I have been struggling with this because when it came to like writing my website, I just had the hardest time because I knew all the jargony stuff I'm supposed to say to sound like I do have this degree, which I do, but it's like I was ready to make fun of it, but I couldn't. And then I just had a very awkward time with it. But I think what you said and how you're living this just made me extra ready to be, you know what, like I can hold space if people are crying and have trauma, but I can also have a really good laugh and it's normal
Yeah.
and okay and cool.
You can be silly and professional. They're
I'm
not
gonna rewrite my whole
interchangeable.
website. Exactly. You
Yeah.
can be both.
We can be silly professionals.
You were sharing about all these cute and funny journal entries. Do you mind sharing some of them with us so that we can inspire other people?
Zoe, I would love to. I mean, is it not a podcast unless you're reading from your journal? Okay.
Can you context this
We
for
are
us
breaking new
so we
ground.
know?
Yeah, I'll give you context. Okay, on top of my regular journal, I also have a dream journal, which is specific. My mom gave me this. It's got uh stars and I don't know, what would you describe this? Clouds, sun.
Eh,
It's metallic-y. It's
wow.
perfectly appropriate for a germ
I mean, it's like
a
super,
germ
super
journal.
inter germ.
My intergalactic germ journal.
Exactly. Oh my God. And it's also kind of ink bolty.
So this is the context in which my dream journal lives. It's literally just me writing down my dreams. Sometimes I'll like analyze them. I'm also just like a big dream nerd. I have like a dream journal dictionary. So if you're like dreaming of a tiger and you're like, what does it mean? You can look it up. But I also think it's personal and sometimes it means different things. Anyways, that's all to say. I have some really wacky, hilarious dreams because I think that's part of the process too. Because I think sometimes your dreams will like reveal stuff in your
Mhm.
subconscious. Your dreams will reveal how self-conscious you are.
Freud never said that. Well, actually, I'm sure he did. Yeah, so you're being
Probably.
Jungian and like Freudian all by yourself
Yes.
with
Yeah.
your dictionaries.
Sometimes some stuff comes out in dreams that you're like, gosh, okay.
Right.
Anyways, this is an entry from June 9th, 2024.
So specific.
Okay.
Okay, going with it.
I was standing over a stove boiling a chunk of beef in an iron skillet. I'll remove this person's name. Came by and asked what I was making. I said beef water. And then he was like, "You mean dog coffee?" with finger guns. It was short, it was sweet. But
You
I
wrote
woke
stand
up.
up in your dreams.
I laughed so hard at that when I woke up. I'm like, what? Yeah.
That was really good. What is that review about you at all?
Been thinking dogs have been on my mind a lot. I was fostering a litter of puppies. So there's been a lot of dog stress going on, which has also been hilarious because it's puppies.
Right.
Maybe
Yeah.
that's
So adorable and insane. And it also sounds to me like you're in your dream, you're trying to, kind of change the situation, or you're trying to deal with something through humor. Would you say that it's a coping kind of thing that you use, like a tool that you use humor to,
absolutely. Yes, I would say that. A coping mechanism. I feel like I definitely use it to I think not take myself so seriously sometimes, especially with work. I think, that can be really stressful and it's very unpredictable and you work so hard to try to get somewhere.
Well, the industry
And you
definitely
just
is.
don't always get there, or I don't know, I've been thrown a lot of curveballs when I'm really trying to stick to a certain plan or get somewhere. And I was like, now we're back to square one. Or it turns out you're moving across the country. I don't know, something like that, that it's yeah, you didn't expect, but is kind of funny when you zoom out and look at it. So I've definitely learned to laugh about things that maybe were a little bit painful in the moment. But then when I've kind of had some time to gain a bigger perspective and you look at the whole situation, then you're like, yeah, that's hilarious. that happened in that way.
Yeah. So really zooming out and finding the funny.
Yeah, zooming out and finding the funny and just embracing the curveballs and the unpredictability of life and the fact that we don't really have control over most of it, So whenever I'm trying too hard to control an outcome or a situation, that's usually when I'm humbled by life in one way.
That's a nice way to put it.
Yeah.
Many humbling things.
Humiliated, what have you.
Well, I resonate and having a sense of humor and accepting that, wow, much as I have done everything and pulled out all the stops, I'm humbled.
Yes,
Well,
I have been humbled many times, so that's what keeps me going.
I think that's kind of huge versus, holding on and trying against all odds to control things outside of, our locus of control.
Yeah, or just feeling bad about it, you can feel really like a failure or you're embarrassed about something, or you can choose to laugh at it and move on with your life.
I agree.
And then mine it for material later on, which is a big part of it as well.
Yes, I hear you. So that sounds to me like that's the kind of magic turnaround of it. Something happens, it's kind of devastating, and then you mine it, and even if you can't mine it right now, that down the road.
Yeah. Yeah, I always think of that now where I'm like, well, there's maybe a joke here later that I can use.
I like that. Actually, I find so much relief even just hearing that.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a relief to be able to laugh at it and yeah, have like a self-deprecating humor about it.
Yeah, I totally agree.
I'm sure there's elements of that that are unhealthy too, though. I feel like
Avoidance, deflecting.
yeah, or even like I know, yeah, like sometimes when I'm in like a really uncomfortable situation or like a confrontational situation, I'll like be trying really hard not to like make a joke about it or like laugh about it. But I think there's also like comedic relief in moments too, where I'm like always trying to like break the tension and like get us in like a more lighthearted place. And
Right.
sometimes you need to be serious. I do think there's part
Mm-hmm.
of me that's always like, I just want to be funny. But it's like,
Mm-hmm.
you can also just like sit in your discomfort and like the situation and not feel like you have to make everything
Right.
lighthearted. Because some things are heavy, some things are really heavy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I agree. Like this moment. Just kidding.
No comment. No comment from me.
I respect that.
I do want to talk about something kind of serious and personal to me, though. Where are my teeth grinders at? Does anybody else wear a night guard? Yeah, let's be brave and vulnerable for a minute. What I want to know that my dentist cannot answer for me is, why are we all so stressed out while we're sleeping? Like, that's fucked up, right? It's real fucked up, because, like, if we can't relax then, what do we have?
Like, whenever I am going through like a difficult time, I do find like journaling really helpful because it forces you to like express what the pain is or like what it is that's sort of like happening to you internally.
Right. Because it's a safe place to be completely kind of raw about everything that you're experiencing, even if it's messy. And then it makes sense of itself once it lands on paper.
Yeah, it's out of my head, it's on paper. It's like a tangible thing that I can like close and kind of like move past in a way. You can tell when it like hits a nerve like as you're writing and then you like start to get more emotional or I like start to cry. I'm like, ugh, I found what it is. I figured out like what is like triggering me.
Changes how you're kind of dealing with it.
Yeah, well, and then also how you communicate that with other people. So it's been helpful for like
Mm.
relationships and stuff when I'm like, I'm feeling a certain way and I think it's because of this. But then once I start like writing it down, I'm like, I realize it's actually like this other layer that's contributing to the way that I'm reacting in these situations and make sense of my own feelings, then allows me to like communicate those and like my needs and like how I interact with people like when I'm in those conversations. I also
Yeah.
like I mean, yeah, you touching on it being really raw because it definitely is, and there's stuff in there that I'm like, gosh, like I had a journal when I was in high school, and that I like wrote in a lot when I was like going through my first like heartbreak, breakup, emotional, like just like tortured teen
Mm-hmm.
moment, and I wrote in my
Mm-hmm.
journal a lot, and I like the sad thing is that like I wrote like it was so raw and like so messy that I was so ashamed of it and I was so afraid that like somebody was gonna find it and read it. And then I remember I like got to a point where I like actually like ripped it to little pieces and like set it on fire because I was like so afraid that somebody was gonna find it. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's like one of my biggest regrets is that like I don't have that anymore. And it was like
Mm.
sort of an early, like traumatic experience that maybe if I had been able to like read how I was
Mm-hmm.
feeling in that situation, I would have been able to like process it a bit better like years
Mm.
later. But I kind of like robbed
Right.
myself of that because I carried so much shame around it. I do like really like respect my journals and they're one thing like I do keep them like all together on that shelf there because they are something that like if there was a fire that's what I'd want to bring, the irony of me burning it and now they're like my
Wow.
fire items. But
Wow.
yeah, because it's like I don't know, it's like my life story, right? Like that's like all I have
Mm-hmm.
and I've like worked so hard and they are like handwritten. It's not something you can like back up. So I think that gives me a greater like appreciation for them now and respect. And it's like, yes, it is raw and messy, but that's also the
Mm-hmm.
point, right? Like, don't judge yourself for it and don't like live in fear that someone's going to read it, because it's like,
right.
it is what it is. I do find them really helpful, even for myself, like years later. You think, like part of it's just
Right.
remembering, right? Like I don't have the best memory sometimes. So to be able to like think of myself as maybe an old person, maybe I'll be old, maybe I won't, but still being able to like have those memories to be able to reference or laugh about or what have you.
Yeah.
So that's part of
Well,
it too.
you took us through this journey about how you went from wanting to burn your journals out of shame, right? To now treasuring them, knowing that they're chapters in your life and part of your life. And, narrative therapy, right? I think you've been naturally doing it yourself all this time. In therapy, people might work with story, with narrative, is like what you did, making meaning later. And I think it's really interesting that your younger self, right, was also maybe sometimes putting in little Easter eggs for your older, usually we think it'll be the wiser self, but you are reauthoring each time. And I think your ability to let go of and to celebrate and to kind of see the strengths in who you were, even if you were being humble. Yeah. Right. Right. But I feel like that is a natural kind of reconciliation and a natural kind of self-love, self-forgiveness, right? Making sense of story. So, you're like kind of doing all the major things that people do in narrative therapy. And in fact, they have some really interesting questions in narrative therapy, which is like, do you see yourself as a villain or a hero, or, who are the other characters in your story? And, is your story, thick or thin? So if your story is really thin, maybe the view is quite narrow, but if it's made thicker, so even to a very thin part of the story where somebody might only see themselves as maybe having suffered, right? When you're able to make it thicker and you can enrich it from, kind of the processing and the unpacking of what else happened, how you're feeling, then your story becomes thicker and you can change the plot, fire the director, and that's just yourself. And do you find that it helps you to kind of decenter from, like a problem and have more perspective?
Sometimes I really struggle with like whether or not like journaling and rereading my own journal is like self-reflective or just like super self-indulgent.
Yeah. But you know what's
Just
kind of
because I am
interesting?
like looking inward so much.
How often in our lives, right? How often in your own life do you get to be self-centered? Do you ever get time to feel like you can even allow yourself, right, to have these moments of connecting with yourself?
Yeah,
Usually.
that's what I was gonna say. Although it is self-centering sometimes, I think it's helpful because being able to like know yourself better makes you a better communicator. If you understand yourself and how you react to certain situations and how you like are in the world, then you're able to look outward. I think people sometimes who are like really quick to get angry or like have outbursts or like I should say reactive, like to certain things or situations. It's
Yeah,
like sometimes
triggers,
they
right?
don't know themselves well enough to realize what's going on, which is why that
Right.
happens sometimes. So
Mm-hmm.
I think being able to like recognize if you are getting triggered in a situation or like foreseeing something that may happen if you're in that context and being able to like prepare yourself accordingly or like remove yourself from a situation or set up boundaries because that's just how you like can operate in a healthy way. I think that is more outward facing than all of this, which is very much like introspective and like inward
Yeah,
facing.
absolutely. What I'm hearing is that you're even challenging, your own kind of perspective, right? Because we all have blind spots. so deliberately, right? We're looking at like, where's my raw spots? Who is poking at them? Yeah, so actually, I think what you said really sums up how using writing and using, a way to reflect through, journaling and questioning, exploring, being curious about the narrative that we tell ourselves. So you're kind of deliberately looking for your own raw spots, your own blind spots, and, kind of looking for exceptions to them even, or new solutions, new strategies. And I think it's so amazing because it's just you and a notebook and a pen, right? For you and for anyone. It is
Yeah, it's
powerful.
very accessible too, right? Like it's something you can do at any time of day on your own with any sort of, writing utensil. Yeah. Even then, like people could, do like voice recording or drawing. Like all of
Right.
that is sort of like a more
True.
accessible form of like,
I agree.
being able
I
to
agree.
do those things.
Yeah. And that was very inclusive and it's so true, right? And also be totally out of the box. You can, kind of do little voice notes.
Comic book, your whole journal could be a comic book. That would be incredible.
That sounds amazing. So I love our conversation and totally, would love to chat more about many, many, many things. Before we kind of wrap this up and out, can I ask you if you have any journal prompts that you want to kind of share?
Yeah, what I always find like funny is kind of like what I said is like when did life throw you a curveball or like
Mm,
give you a humbling experience, that you maybe didn't want at the time,
right.
but now there's like some humor in it. So those are the stories that I always find really entertaining and cathartic
Mm-hmm.
to be able to like, yeah, process and laugh about later. So that could be a prompt,
Yeah, I love
which,
that.
yeah, for me, there's a lot of those. Maybe some people don't have them, but I definitely have a lot of those.
Yeah, I love it. I will try that myself as well. Well, when I think back on, that stand-up class and writing about, something for me that would have been usually a topic that is not so funny, like cancer, but it
Yeah.
ended up being so cathartic on stage, laughing about it with
Yeah.
people, right? Getting them to guess like which breast is the one that's not so real. Yeah.
Yeah, and your mammogram bit with the panini press. That was so funny. I still talk about
Yeah.
that.
You do. Oh. And so I think, and then it found me community, right? It found me, people that I really still, I know we're not always able to be right next to each other because of distance, but then, the heart actually does feel so close and so much support. Even you doing this recording with me right now, that's part of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well,
thank you so much, Andrea.
of course. Thank you for having me. And I think also just like, I mean, what you said and tying into like writing and comedy is I think when people like lean into the vulnerabilities and the things that like are maybe a little bit more like obscure or like painful to talk about, like that's what I find really like cathartic to hear as like an audience member too. Something like so specific that you think is like, oh, I'm the only one that has this experience. And then you hear a room full of people laughing or like being in the audience and like laughing, like, oh, I also have experienced that. So I think it's like, yeah, it connects people too when you lean into that like raw, messy part of life and
Mm-hmm.
embrace it and find the humor in it and not just try to like rip it to pieces and burn it.
That is so true. That feeling of, bringing something human and vulnerable out,
Mhm.
and realizing you're not alone or helping somebody realize they're not
Yeah.
alone.
Yeah, it's such
I
a great
heard,
feeling.
yeah, and I heard this quote, our stories make us human. And so what you said just really kind of made that come to life for me. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, actually now I feel like I'm so thankful that I get to be human and you gave me the opportunity to just be human with you. I'm
Aw.
burning journals with you. I am also tearing them up. I get it about the shame thing. It's like, who's gonna find it? And then what will happen? But now I do also realize, looking back, if I looked back at those journals when I was 15 and dying for somebody,
Yeah.
too, right? If I look back on that now, I'd be like, oh, like, she's so cute.
Yeah.
Right? Versus like all the, kind of shame that I had this mushroom of shame over me.
Yeah. You've got some perspective. We can laugh
Yeah.
about it.
Now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm also a really good hand washer. You know how the rule is like to lather for 20 seconds, which I do, like front and back and tips, like just like the diagram shows. And honestly, like I was doing this even before COVID, so I guess you could say I'm a trendsetter in that way. Anyways, I was in a public bathroom recently, and the person beside me noticed, and they were like, wow, you're so thorough, you must be a nurse. And I took that as the biggest compliment. I naturally went straight to my mom because I'm like, oh, she's gonna be so proud of me. And she just said, you know what, I'd be more proud of you if you actually were a nurse. Real job, now that's cool. Stop panhandling the government for money. Thank you guys.
Wow. Okay. I have to admit that was one of the first few episodes that I recorded, and I was pretty nervous. And I was also really honored to talk to my friend who is very funny and very inspiring. And so basically the whole time I was either giggling or laughing. But I think it's kind of good for you. In fact, if we were all a little sillier all day, I think we would all feel a little happier. It would be most therapeutic. Anyway, I hope you try to get out your journals and start getting writing. I'll love to hear how that goes for you. I'll love to hear whether you like this episode or what your percolations are around it. If you'd like to find me on Instagram, I am at avalotherapy, and website for me is avalotherapy.com. Check out Andrea's amazing, hilarious work. Go to birdshitfilms.ca and also follow her at Andy Feltrin _. You see everything in the notes. Alrighty. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time. Ciao.